present to you. You know how I know this? So, we're on the end of 3 weeks of travel, and after this, we start going back home. So, don't get a big header or anything. I think we'll go ahead and start. Hopefully, Pastor will make his way here shortly. I hear him. It's funny how you hear pastors, 100 yards away. Let's go ahead and start talking, or speak for 20 minutes at a time. That's what we do. We open our mouth and talk for 20 minutes.
That's right.
Or if you want to introduce me, you can, but I'm ready to just charge right now.
Sure. Pastor Rosso and I have a lengthy history. All of about 6 or 7 weeks.
Yes. Oh, we go way back.
Yeah, way back. So, but actually, Pastor Rosso, correct me if I'm wrong, but you either started or instrumental in starting Brothers of John the Stephen.
No, I did start.
Yeah, so he started the organization that has this incredible online presence called Steadfast Lutherans that has for the last 2 years sponsored the regional conference up at our sister church up north in Glendale at Atonement Lutheran, which we just concluded on Saturday afternoon. And so the pastor of Atonement let me know that Pastor Rosso was going to be in town and looking for a place to talk about Lutherans in Africa. I said, absolutely, we would love to hear all about the work going on over there. So, no, I'll let you. Do you want to share anything more about yourself? Other than that, Pastor Rosso, it's all yours.
Thank you. I will share a little bit. Let's see, about a week and a half ago, we were in Seaside, California, and that's not a very nice place. It's like right on the Monterey Peninsula.
Yeah.
It's so much better here, because as I said, you're going to be my favorite group. Anyway, I was mentioning to them, this is where this happened. So I got to the end of the presentation, I said, any questions? And this lady raises her hand and she says, who are you? Because I love this so much, I just jumped right in and I said, oh, that's a very good question. So, as Pastor mentioned, I previously did volunteer work with Brothers of John the Stephen, but I was parish pastor for 30 years, and I met Reverend May, who you will see here. I think you had his little prayer card in the handout this morning. And I met him, 7 or 8 years ago, and through another staff person at our church in Naperville, Illinois. And so got to, over a couple of years, come to realize he is an incredibly virtuous man. He's very sacrificial. He's a true evangelist. And I started going around with him, but by this point in my ministry, I had more vacation than I cared to use. And so I would take a few days every year vacation and travel with him and make presentations like this with him. Well, then he started saying to me, you should do this for us full time. And I thought, well, no, I've got it really, really good where I'm at. I was in a large church in Naperville, Illinois. 3 pastors. I was a senior pastor for 22 years. We had 35 full and part-time staff. And I think by the time I left, I was involved with the hiring of about 32 of those 35. One of the people who was already there when I got there was this lady's sister, Susie. Susie and Jim. I brought some cheese heads along. Okay, so they just, she's the sister of this lady I used to work with, and so just through Facebook figured out they were going to be here, and they saw me post some stuff from yesterday, and they said, where are you going to be tomorrow? And so anyway, so here they are. So thank you for coming. So I said to Reverend May, it's like, man, we had a day school with 250 kids in it, full-time musician. I didn't have to pick any hymns. Now, you would say that's a bad thing. I thought it was a good thing.
I certainly would say that.
Exactly. You're a really good pastor. And by the way, like I was telling you, it was so nice to have a liturgy. I know I speak for Phyllis as well. We go all around, and we tend to end up at liturgical places because, as you'll see, what our work is. So anyway, So then finally, I said to Reverend May, I said, well, we can, give a number to your board and see if that would work. This is how much I would need to live on, and it's not much. And they agreed. And they agreed for a pretty generous expense account so I can travel all around the country and do this. So we moved to the coast in Washington. Phyllis is from the state of Washington. And we built our own house over the last year and a half. We're now living in it. And again, did I mention you're my favorite group? Because after this presentation, we're going to drive back to our house that we built. So that'll be nice. But it's going to take a few days to get there. All right. So, deep into Africa. Has anybody ever heard of the book or movie Out of Africa?
Yes.
Yeah. It's my boss, Reverend May. I mentioned he's very pious. He hates it when I bring this up. He rolls his eyes. Because the premise of the book is not the best premise to be mentioning in a Christian Bible class. Right. The premise of the book is Meryl Streep's character, Colin, we would say Karen, but it's Dutch, so it's pronounced Colin. They named a whole town after her. Colin Blixen. She marries this guy, and then he turns out to be kind of a dud, and she falls in love with none other than Robert Redford, who's playing the character of the lion hunter, Dennis. And so she has this affair with him, so that's why my boss doesn't like me to bring this up. But I just can't help it because it relates to this so much. Not only because of the theme, we're not going to go out of Africa, we're going to go deep into Africa, but because the book and movie, and you can go online and you can watch the whole movie online now, and for like free on YouTube. You just can't make out who the characters are, but you can watch it. And this first line is there. We owned a coffee plantation at the foot of the Gong Hills. Gong, N-G-O-N-G. So you got to kind of say, it's like rolling your R's, in Spanish. Gong Hills. And here are the Gong Hills. This is the western side. Out in the bush, this is where we're building our new school, and that's what we will end with this morning. Here is the coffee plantation. It's now a historic site in the suburb of Nairobi. Nairobi's a big city, 4 million people. Colin is the name of the town. They named it after her. And when I went there, they were doing a wedding, so they were all set up for a wedding. And that blue line there, that's the Gong Hills from the east side. About 45 minutes west of Nairobi in Kenya, Africa. So, this is the side of the hills. It's only, by car, it's only about maybe 45 minutes from here. But that would have been at least a day's travel back then. This was the turn of the 20th century, so the early 1900s when Out of Africa is set. So the last thing, there are no lions now where we are. There are other wild animals, which I will show you, but there are no lions. This is where Dennis, Robert Redford in the movie, went on his safaris. And he couldn't give up his safaris for Colin Blixen. And so it's a sad story. It gets even more sad because he dies in a plane crash. And so he used to hunt, go on safari on this western side of the Gong Hills. And his burial tomb is just over the other side of this little saddle right here. And I didn't go see it because you got to pay somebody $10 to get into their backyard and see this obelisk, and that's all it is. But anyway, that's where our new headquarters is located. So we're not going to go out of Africa, we're going to go deep into Africa, deep into the continent, deep into the bush, and most importantly, deep into the actual mission needs in Africa. So what does Africa need? This is a wake-up call for America. I remember my mother bought me a little book from the little Concordia CPH book display, a little glass box at our church, and it was a mission book, and you would turn the page, and there'd be a guy in a clerical standing in a rice field. and he's preaching the gospel. And you turn the next page, and there would be a guy with tigers in the background. He's in India, and he's standing out in this field doing what? Wearing his clerical, preaching the gospel. And you turn the next page, and so forth and so on. That's mission work. But there are two things that are happening today. One thing is, even our beloved Missouri Synod is kind of turning missions into mercy work, as I mentioned in the sermon. Nothing wrong with mercy work, but we should not do it at the expense of actually preaching the gospel. The other thing is the kind of mission work and preaching of the gospel that is needed in Africa. To introduce that theme, I'm going to ask you this question. Is this a missions opportunity? Well, yes and no. I'm going to talk about three things with this picture. Johnny Cash, gospel music, and the Maasai tribe. All right? Oh, they all go together, believe me. So, I think almost every other picture you see is one that I took. But actually, this one I didn't take. I have one similar to this, but it just wasn't quite as clear, so I got this offline. So this is the Masai Mara. It's the eastern end of the Serengeti that you hear about. It's this large grassland, probably about the size of, I'd say, the state of Iowa. Wow. Yeah, it's large grassland. It's where about anywhere from 50 to 75% of the wildlife that you see filmed in Africa is filmed. This is where Phyllis and I got to go on a safari, and I'll show you some more pictures of this later. So the Maasai, anybody ever heard of the Maasai tribe? Mm-hmm. Yeah. And even if you haven't heard of them, you've probably heard about them. They are nomads, and so they've got goats and cattle, and they just wander the countryside. Well, as of 1950, that didn't work so well because all of these countries are getting westernized by the Europeans and also by the Americans. And they're adopting democracies and they're getting borders set for all their countries. So the Maasai, they're trying to force them to be westernized and settle them down. And many of them still wear their old tribal stuff. A lot of them are wearing Western type clothing these days. So the Maasai, they are the tribe, and this is where you might have heard of them. For their coming of age, the young boys, instead of going and, for 2 years and being bored out of their gourds by the pastor in confirmation class, and just speaking autobiographically there, okay. Instead of that, their confirmation is to go out with 4 to 20 other boys, however many are in the confirmation class, and they have to go out and kill a lion just with spears in their bare hands and bring the lion back. And so that's the Maasai. So they are known all over Africa as a very powerful and warring tribe. All right. So these days, the Maasai in the movement toward westernization, a lot of them are security guards because of their history of being such tough, rough guys. Matter of fact, we have a couple Maasai at our school that are security guards. Well, is this a missions opportunity? Yes and no. Reverend May, when pastors come over to teach, and by the way, Pastor, this is now your open invitation, and for the rest of your life, I'm really sorry to see such a young child in your arms. That means you won't come. At least not for many years. But maybe you will, I don't know. So this will be the first of many times that I will annoy you, asking you to come teach.
Pastor May is.
All right, so we are good. Because we need faithful men. And by the way, we are teaching the liturgy over in Africa. We have the Lutheran service book. I'll hold it up here. This blue hymnal here. This is the Lutheran service book translated by the Canadians into French for the French Canadians. And this was very useful, or is still useful in Africa. Because, about a fourth of the countries are of French-speaking origin. So anyway, hopefully we can get you over there to teach some liturgy or any of the other doctrinal classes. So, Reverend May likes to take the teachers who come over out on safari. And he took Phyllis and I out for an afternoon on safari, and Reverend May loves Johnny Cash. And it's not a bad trait, you know. He loves Johnny Cash, and he had just gotten his new CD titled Johnny Cash Sings Gospel Favorites. Okay? So, we hire this Maasai warrior to be our guide, and for the whole 4 or 5 hours, you know, we're like from the middle of Iowa and you know, the United States and Illinois, and you know, we're just amazed that we're on safari, and Reverend May has got this Johnny Cash CD blaring. It's like, well, I'm not going to say anything to him, you know, like, you know, we're his guests, and then it got really weird. He kept nudging the Maasai warrior to sing along with Johnny Cash. And it's like, what is that all about? That's bizarre. Well, this went on for 4 hours. And the guy just kept like just kind of blowing him off. Well, he finally just wore down. Reverend May has a way of doing that to you. And so he just finally wore down. And in the last half an hour, he started singing along with Johnny Cash. And he knew every word to every gospel song. I didn't think it could get any weirder, and that's what I did. So I go back and I ask, is this a missions opportunity? Well, yes and no. Reverend May knew that most likely this guy went to a Pentecostal church. And he did. And so, you know, they don't sing Lutheran chorales, they don't sing the liturgy, they're singing gospel music. And he knew all of the music. And so, is this a missions opportunity? Well, yes and no. He's already met Jesus. Now, he's met Jesus with all of the extra incorrect doctrine of Pentecostalism, but this is an introduction. Let's go to the next slide here to show us what Africa needs. The surprising truth is, Africa primarily needs teaching, not new churches nor mercy. This is the picture I got of the Maasai warrior looking off into the distance at the Serengeti. And this was our actual guide who knew Johnny Cash music. So, planting churches is fine, but there are 20 million Lutherans in Africa. 360 million other Christians. So, this is a church that I got to preach in up in Kisii, Kenya. It's about 2.5 hours from where our headquarters is at. And so I got two Where's Waldo exercises for you. Where is the bishop? Can anybody spot the bishop? Pastor can, but he didn't get it. Yes? You said it. In the purple, yeah. So when you see purple or mauve, clerical, that's supposed to be for a bishop. You know, in California, 20, 30 years ago, when everything was, the church of what's happening now, these Lutheran pastors were going out and buying these mauve shirts. They didn't realize it was the bishop's shirt. So, this is the bishop. Now, second, where's Waldo? Can anybody find Phyllis in the picture? Yeah, there's Phyllis. So, the reason I show this picture is because this was a big city. It was maybe 1 million people. There are 500 people in that church. Would you like to have 500 people in church on a Sunday? Yeah. So these are Lutherans. 500 Lutherans. And because they knew I was coming to preach, because they knew there was a white American coming to preach, there's actually a couple hundred more out in the foyer or the courtyard out there. But this is normal. They normally fill the church with 500 people every Sunday. So, there are 20 million Lutherans in Africa. The problem is, the churches are there, and further evidence of that. This is 2 times ago when I met Bawet, and 2 years ago, and I taught about 28 pastors. Let's go on. The pastors and the evangelists don't know Lutheran teaching. Many African Lutheran pastors do not know the basics of what we take for granted in confirmation classes. How did this dire situation come about? Well, here is a picture of a cathedral over in Europe. And on Sunday mornings, especially in Western Europe, they're pretty much empty. Because liberalism, I don't know, some of you might remember the battle for the Bible in the Missouri Synod. back in the late 60s and the 70s. That battle got fought in Europe 150 years ago, and the Bible lost. And so, over the last 170 years or 200 years or so since the Enlightenment, Christianity has slowly been waning in Africa or in Europe because they gave up on the truth of the Bible. When you give up on the truth of the Bible, it's not going to be long before you don't have Christianity. And that's one of the things that's happening in our culture today. For better or for worse, we're not out to change the world, but it is a fact that our country has given up on the truth of the Bible as a whole. And so, as the European churches went, so too went the African churches, because these are the guys who evangelized Africa, and they're still over there, and the African churches slowly lost the Bible. And so they're more conservative in general. In Africa, they do not accept homosexuality, period. It's just taboo. Some of you might have noticed in the news this last week that the United Methodist Church International got the biggest surprise they could have ever thought, the leaders. The bureaucrats had proposed this change that the United Methodist Church International, including the American United Methodist Church, would accept practicing homosexuality as clergy, that they would do homosexual marriages, and they brought it to the big convention this week, and it got voted down. Yes. Because of the Africans and the Philippines who were there as delegates. Got voted down it was narrow, 53 to 47. But anyway, so thankfully, the Africans have maintained basic morality, but they have lost the truth of Scripture. And so, next slide. That's why it's important for us to teach the gospel there. Planting churches is fine, but most Lutheran Africans have never heard of the catechism. Most Lutherans know Pentecostal doctrine better than Lutheran doctrine. The largest Lutheran body in the world is the Makami Church in Ethiopia, with 6 million members. You go to their website, and it doesn't even mention the Book of Concord, let alone the small catechism. So, as I mentioned in the sermon, they're Lutherans, Lutherans in name only. And they need to be taught. And they're happy to learn. They're happy to embrace good teaching. Let's go on. Acts of mercy are fine, but they do not need eyeglasses. They need eyes to see the Scriptures. It's actually disturbing to hear where a lot of items donated end up. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this. It's rather disheartening. So this is the scene in the cities and in the villages everywhere. They have these little kind of capitalistic little huts where merchants sell their wares. Here's one that focused just on shoes. And this was down by, this was in Tanzania, by Lake Victoria. And so, it's a whole bunch of Adidas shoes. They don't make Adidas tennis shoes in Africa. Okay? Guess whose shoes these are? They're yours. Yeah. There's a lot of corruption in Africa. Phyllis and I can't even send gifts to the May family through the mail because they'll just get confiscated. When they see something coming from the USA and it's in a box, it's like, oh, goodies in here. The customs agents are on the tape. We are able to ship big containers, like they're making these tiny homes out of and stuff, those big shipping containers. We're able to ship those. And so we load those up in Houston, and I don't know what the reason is, but those make it to us. They still go through every last little item, but there's a very detailed process where you have to itemize every single thing that is in the container. So that works. Well, these shoes, so a bunch of Americans donated these shoes, and then the customs agents, they steal them, sell them on the black market, probably for 25 cents, and then the shop owners sell them for 50 cents, and they make a great profit. So, they don't need mercy. The mercy is even kind of questionable as we do it. They can't handle money. We don't give any money away to Africans. They abuse it. They don't know how to handle it. It's bad for them. And there are systematic problems on the continent that need to be changed systematically. And a handout here or there is not going to address that. So, before we get too much deeper, let's do a quick geography lesson. So you can fit 4 United States in Africa. The United States, China, India, and all of Europe fits in Africa. That's how big it is. You want to back up just one second? So you can fit 4 United States in Africa. Our Missouri Synod has 16 ordained ministers in Africa. So if you think about that, if it's 4 times the size of the United States, that would be like having 4 missionaries in a continent the size of the United States. Now, could we go to bed at night and say, oh, there, we've done our job, we got 4 missionaries in the United States? No, we couldn't sleep comfortably. And so, even though we are not operated by the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, we are all Missouri Synod Lutherans. Our doctrinal statement comes right out of the Constitution of the Missouri Synod. So we're very much dedicated to it. But we are not part of the Missouri Synod. We work with the Missouri Synod. They know where we're at, and we know where they're at, and we make sure that we go to the place. The point is, there's plenty of work to do for everybody. Okay, now you go on. Thanks. So here's where LA serves the gospel. Down in the lower 2/3 of the continent. The upper third is mostly Muslim. We're happy to serve there as well, but there just is enough work to do down here. And our work is primarily training these pastors and these lay preachers. We serve the gospel from Kenya. There it is. Can you hit the left button? Okay, now watch this. I'm not very good technologically, so I'm really proud of the fact that I can make this thing fly in here. You see that? Yeah, yeah, isn't that pretty good? I can do it blindfold. Try it again. Did you hit it? Okay.
Yeah.
All right. See? Okay. You want me to move on? Because you've heard that 19,000 times.
Yeah.
I still laugh at it. I still find it funny. All right. So now let's go on. Sorry, I'm going to back up. Kenya is not in the center of the continent. That would be somewhere about here. But we are the virtual center, which is why we chose Nairobi, Kenya to be our headquarters, because almost every flight, like from here to the west and south, ends up in Nairobi. Kenya Airlines is the largest in the continent. So here is Nairobi. Here's the airport. We're right over here on the other side of the Gong Hills that are right here. And here's that game preserve I was telling you about. It's about 3 hours to get there from here. And we're strategically located because the Chinese are coming in. Not very many people are aware of this. I wouldn't be aware of it, except for the fact that there's 2 big Chinese mines a couple of miles either side of our new site. The Chinese are coming in, and pardon the expression, but they're raping the continent. And then what they're doing is they're building all of this infrastructure so that they can get the materials out and back to China. What they're doing is they're building all this infrastructure as loans to these countries in Africa. And so the countries of Africa are in deep debt to China, and it's just getting deeper and deeper. And they just can't help themselves because they're getting all this stuff. It's been good for us. When I went 3 years ago, there was a whole series of huge guy wires without any wires on the poles. And man, what is that? And Reverend May said, that's the Chinese. Sure enough, I come back the next year, they're strung with electricity and everything's functioning. Well, they are also building an interstate from here to the airport. So right now it takes us about an hour and a half to get to the airport. Once that's done, it'll take us about a half an hour. So Reverend May was very strategic in picking out our headquarters. The wonders of Africa. When I was a kid, I'd go to these mission presentations, and I'd never see enough of the animals and stuff. So this is for me, okay, and for you. Let's take a look. So I always like to take the hood of our old beat-up Toyota Land Cruiser in the picture because it's got Luther's seal on it. So I just think this is so bizarre. My mind is a little strange. But I take pleasure in seeing Luther's seal with a couple of giraffes crossing the road. then sometimes you're looking at the backside of the animals. So that Maasai, that game preserve, worldwide known. The highway from the largest city to the north, about an hour and a half north, down to the Maasai, is this highway right here. And we were on our way to the game preserve, and we had to stop and let this herd of cows go through. There's some more amazing views. It's a beautiful continent. I'm sorry this isn't a better picture, but these are some bougainvillea. They line the roads all over Nairobi. And then just a beautiful, colorful fruit market. And these are the Maasai, I call them serapes. It's the tribal coat that they wear. Their primary color is red, but then they have different patterns for each different tribe. And this is just another shot of the Maasai game preserve. So here's the frame of the Land Cruiser, just to show you how close you get to these wild animals. And we repeated these scenes dozens of times. There's a couple of lionesses. So it turns out, that's how close we were, so I have to show you that other picture. Turns out the lions are not much of a threat to humans in Africa. They're just like your house cats. They eat, and then what do? Sleep. Yeah, they just sleep. So usually the lionesses end up doing the work. Sometimes the male will go out and kill. The lionesses will go out, kill a wildebeest. They drag it back under the shade, and then they eat on it for a couple hours, and then they go to sleep for a couple of days. And then they kind of wake up and realize, I'm kind of hungry. And they just repeat to do the same thing again. So, I should focus. Well, I'm not going to mess with that because I might mess it up. So, the continent is not very well developed. We were in one of the most developed areas, and still it was rare to see this kind of sign. This is a beautiful sign in the game preserve. I think it's the only one we saw in the whole park. And it's nice masonry work, stone, and then it's got these raised aluminum letters. And if you can't read it, it says hippo, pool, and toilet. So they were multitasking. They were getting both things in on one sign. So there's the hippos, a couple hundred yards away. You go look, and there's these hippos just looking up at you. And I got to tell you something. These hippos were almost as real as the ones you see at Disneyland. Yeah, they were that real. And they did their just like Disneyland. They open their mouths and the spray comes out and they grunt and groan. And that's all they did. They just sit there all day long in the river. More people die from hippos than any other wild animal in Africa. They run 35 miles an hour. And but the thing is, during the day you're fine. Because they're just like the lionesses. They got their thing. They just go out in the river, wait until the sun goes down. So we're standing on this concrete platform. There's no fence around it. It's just a concrete platform, probably about as big as from here to the projector there. And it's the three of us are standing there, and I look to the right, and there's some tracks in the mud. And I asked whoever man, I said, "What are that?" He said, "Oh, those are hippo tracks." And I happen to know behind us, there's more tracks. I said, "Are those more hippo tracks?" He says, "Yeah." And I looked to the left. Of course, in front of us is the river. And I looked to the left, and there's more hippo tracks. And I looked at those hippo tracks, and I said, "I think I need to go to the toilet." Okay. Oh, here's some more wild animals of the Maasai. And I don't want you to be confused. This really svelte, good-looking guy over here, that's me. And then that fat guy over there, that's Reverend May. Don't tell him I said that. Oh, actually, I say it. And then finally, some animals at the new site. So this picture is about a mile away from the new site. There's a herd of about 25 giraffes that wander the valley where our new site is being located. It's about 4 miles wide, this valley. It's probably about 25 miles wide. So about once a month, they end up at our site. And then across the street, we have a bunch of baboons. The giraffes are very well-mannered. The baboons have no manners at all. Okay? The giraffes will come to our site. They'll stop at our little tiny fences, and they'll lean over and they'll eat whatever acacia leaves they can reach. The baboons, they wait until night. They jump over the fence. They go into our little makeshift tin hut kitchen. They break in, they break open the cabinets, and they steal the food. We don't like the baboons. Uh-oh. I said how beautiful it is, but I tell you, Africa is just filled with these contrasts. The beauty can be beastly. So we're driving along in the national park, and all of a sudden we see this giraffe carcass. Now, at this point, our guide was with us, and he pointed out, he said, the lions usually eat the wildebeests, but if they can't find a wildebeest, they will take down a giraffe. And so that's what happened here. The hard frontier life in Africa, we're going to go through this quickly so we can get to the point. Africa is a wondrous place, but life is hard. Go on to the next slide. Northern part of Africa is Islamic, and I just put a few of the sites where there's been some extreme Islam terrorism, including Nairobi. So, about 6 months before we were going to Nairobi for the first time is when Al-Shabaab, I think those were the Somalis, Al-Shabaab killed 75 people in a shopping mall in Nairobi. You know, so I quick email Reverend Manny and said, hey, what's going on? Is it safe for us to come? And he said, well, two things. Number one, that was on the other side of town. It's a city of 4 million people. And then secondly, he said, would you go to New York City for touring? I said, yeah, why not? He said, well, we had 75 killed. You know, you had 4,000 killed in New York City. I said, oh, good point. And so, essentially, you know, the terrorism is no worse in Africa than it is here. So, the roads are mostly rough and muddy, and they're not safe at night. You just don't travel at night. You go about 20 to 30 miles an hour, and the entire time you're going back and forth between the lanes trying to dodge the big potholes. You cannot dodge the potholes in general. You're just trying to miss the big ones. This was the main road outside of the best hotel in a city in Tanzania, Chingaya. And by best hotel, I mean almost as good as a Motel 6. Okay?
Oh boy.
It was fascinating. You could multitask in this hotel. So in the toilet, the shower head was directly above the stool.
What?
Oh, there's such a thing about that for a while. Okay, and then there's those cows again. Hey, get out of here. We don't want to see those cows. All right, the food is not up to Western standards. This is some goat meat, and if you can see that black speck, that is a horsefly. And there were tons of flies flying around in this meat locker, not refrigerated. And these are old goats. And old goats it's like eating leather. The people in Africa get meat twice a year, Christmas and Easter. Yeah, and it's usually some of the old tough goat, but they love it. So our teaching sessions are about 2 weeks long. And on the second Friday, we serve meat. And the pastors and the evangelists are just thrilled to death. I go there and I teach every year. And so on that second Friday, I get up in the morning and I look out, and hanging from the tree are a couple of goats. And they're leading them. And that's going to be our dinner. And so, anyway, the pastors and the evangelists are really happy to get some meat. And then this guy's got some chickens in his basket. I call it chicken in a basket. Chicken and biscuit, whatever. There are amenities in the larger cities. There are some regular department stores. You see a few gas stations that look very Western, but for the most part, it's pretty rough. There's trash everywhere. They just haven't gotten to the point yet where they're addressing that. They were so quickly Westernized that they haven't caught up with the rule of law. We donate all these John Deere tractors to them, but they still prefer to just simply use 3 cows pulling a single plowshare. Many of them live in regular Western housing, what we would call regular Western housing. But for the most, or not for the most part, about half of them live in mud huts, and the glue to keep that mud together is cow manure. I mentioned earlier about all these donated items getting over there and then getting sold in the market. So So this lady has a Houston Astros jersey on. I don't think she's a Houston Astros fan. I just kind of get that idea. All right, let's wrap this up with the most important thing. Life is hard. They may need eyeglasses, but more so, they need eyes to see Jesus. So this is what Lutherans in Africa does. First bullet point, we do have a parish congregation with Sunday services. That's the least important thing we do. This is from least to most important. And, oh, I got to sneeze.
God bless you.
Excuse me. So, we do have a parish congregation. That is mostly for our staff, but we do get locals who are internationals, and then we do get locals who are Kenyans who come. Now, we're moving outside of the city, and so we're going to have to kind of, it'll be interesting to see how many people still come, because it's now going to be an hour commute for them to come to church. But I think a lot of them still will, and we're hoping to make connections with the neighbors around us. We translate Lutheran materials into tribal languages. Some of you may have heard of Lutheran Heritage Foundation. Reverend May is the director for Lutheran Heritage Africa, but he doesn't take a salary from them. That's a long story that I will tell you next year when I come back. And by the way, we try to keep in contact with the congregations we have been to, and so this won't be a one and done thing. Should be able to get back at least every year and a half or so, and I'll give you an update on where we're at. So anyway, Reverend May is the director for Lutheran Heritage Africa. He doesn't take a salary from them. Instead, he's paid by Lutherans in Africa. Lutheran Heritage, they can't teach the gospel. They are what's called a registered service organization of the Synod, and that keeps them from teaching the gospel because only the Synod, have I explained this to you yet, Pastor? Yeah. It's a bureaucratic oddity. Only the Synod can send missionaries to teach. See, it makes sense as soon as you hear it. Oh, yeah. You guys can't send your own missionary. Okay? You would send a missionary through the Synod. All right? Well, our group got started through some interesting stuff. Reverend May started out as a Missouri Synod missionary, and then he got called by Lutheran Heritage. They had some financial problems during the recession, the housing recession. He and his pastor in Ohio formed this 501c called Lutheran in Africa. But he continues to do the work of Lutheran Heritage, directing the distribution and translation of materials around the continent. I'm going to show you some of those a little bit later. So we distribute those. Most importantly, this is why we organized, so that we can teach seminars for pastors and evangelists around the continent, and now at our new center. Let's go ahead and go on. This is the distribution of the Book of Concord. I'll tell you a little bit about our director, Reverend May. First of all, he's an evangelist. He's kind of one of those guys that sits in an airplane, and before the plane ride is over, he's told the person next to him about Jesus. I'm more of a Lutheran, so I don't do that. He has a devoted family. 5 of his 6 children were born while they were in Africa. They weren't actually born in Africa. His wife is Finnish, and she's still under the Finnish health system, and so to have her children, she goes back and lives with her mother for a month in Finland. But then the babies go right to Africa. And 2 years ago, I was in Africa when Reverend May announced to a group of pastors that he had decided to stay in Africa for the rest of his life, and they gave him a standing ovation. It was really cool. And so he's fearless and frugal. And I want to tell you a story about him being fearless and frugal. Phyllis and I got to cross a border from Kenya and Tanzania with him, and it's a harrowing event. There's guards all over with what's the gun with the long stock on it? AK-47. Yeah. So there's guards all over, and it takes a couple of hours, and you get interviewed, and it's crazy. And so here's another story told by one of our board members. He is a music director in the suburbs of Chicago, in one of the Missouri Synod churches. He's a little tiny guy. He's about probably weighs half as much as I do. And so they were crossing this border. And they come to the border, and the border guard says, that will be X number of Kenya shillings to get across the border. And Reverend May looked at him and says, no, it's not. Look, the sign right here says this is how much I'm supposed to pay, and that's what I'm going to pay you. And the guy said, no, you're not. You're going to pay this inflated number. And this went on for a few minutes. And so then it was starting to get kind of heated. And this tiny little cantor, music director, he just whispers into Reverend May's ear. He says, just pay the man. And we know exactly what he was talking about in that story, because it is intimidating. So finally, Reverend May says the worst thing and the best thing he could say to that border guard. First thing, he asks him a question. He says, do you know where this money came from? And the border guard already knows, because look, he's white and he's wearing a clerical. He knows he's an American evangelist. And he knows there is American money supporting him. And so the border guard says, yeah. And do you know who gave me this money and what it's for? And then the border guard was kind of stumped, He didn't know how to answer that. So Reverend May said, this money was given by Christians in America for the Christians on the other side of the border to learn about Jesus and the Bible. And the guy says, okay, and you I'm out of the chart and let it through. I could never do that. I would just shut it out, whatever. I mean, he literally said to him, you got to grease the palm a little bit here. Everybody's on a table. And so I tell you that story because he's frugal and he's fearless. He's fearless to be a full-time missionary in Africa. I could never do it. He is, I have a rough life. I have to go to Seaside, California. And he is frugal. And so any dollar you give to Lutherans in Africa is going to be treated like he was treating that money with that border guard. And that's a good thing to know. And he's got a godly vision. He was previously an architect, and so he has helped to design our new site. Why don't we go to the next slide? Before we talk about the new site, this is every year I go to this meeting. It's our annual meeting. We have a board in the United States and a board in Australia and a board in Finland. Those three are all independent. And then we have a board in Africa. The board in Africa, they don't get any money because, again, they can't handle the money. So around this table here's one of the translators, some Americans who were there to visit, and then bishops from around Africa. Over here, this is Pastor Matt Edgar from Australia, and he does what I do over in Australia. And then these two guys are from the Lutheran Church in South Africa. They were coming to see our new site because they were hearing incredible things about our new site, and they wanted to see what we were up to and learn things. And they learned a lot. They were very impressed. Our current big vision is to build this seminary, and we're about maybe a fourth done already. Let's go on to the next one. And the next one. Yeah, here we go. So here's the plan. So those long hills are over here. City of Nairobi is another hour and a half that way. And then we have this long, narrow strip of land. And you can see some of the buildings. This administrative building is already built. I'll show you pictures of that. And at the library is almost completed. And we've got guest housing over here and our staff housing. And in the middle, we have this livestock and garden area. I'll show you a bunch of pictures of that. So we have turkeys, we have chickens. This is our old cow when we were back in Cotton. These are our new cows. We've got a cow, a bull, and a baby cow. The baby cow was a boy, so we sold him because we want lady cows so we can get milk and have more babies. And then these are the fields. Grow lots of vegetables. One pastor came and he brought us this gift. They have no money. He brought us 4 banana trees. And the next year I came, they were producing bananas. It was really nice. So here's the road out here on this side of the property. It is terrible. And then this is our old classroom, which was just nothing but a grass hut roof with visqueen plastic on the walls, and you had to talk really loud because it's windy in those his swinging walls were flapping back and forth. And here is the first building we built, the administrative building. Now, you notice something similar about this scene and this scene? I mentioned how Reverend May is so frugal. So he picked a site that's just loaded with rock. And so we're building the buildings out of that rock. That's just really cool. And so here's that tin hut kitchen. This will get replaced probably within the next year. We're just starting. This is in the next phase of our building. And it'll be a nice, regular, sealed building. This is the library. The footprint of this building is probably, if you were to go all the way to that wall, beyond the false wall there, and then double the size of this room, that's the footprint, and there's 2 floors. So the bottom floors will be library and classrooms. The top floor is all reserved for the translation lab. Here is the concrete bridge that we built, and since I have been there a year ago, they built the dam here. That's a dry creek bed, but in the rainy season it fills up, and so we're going to have this nice reservoir for fish, so that we can eat fish, and also have water for the neighbors. This is the director's house that was being put up a year ago, and then this is the guest cottage. So when you come over to volunteer, yes, you'll have a nice guest cottage to stay in. All right, so here's the library. Here you can see some of the books that we've got. This is just about 1/5 of all of the translated materials that we have that we're constantly using in our classes. So here's a classroom in the lower floor of the library. And then we're also still distributing them all around the continent. We not only teach at our school, but we also still travel the continent. And here's another great story. A year ago, when I came, I had just seen the property and the administrative building. The library was not started. And this is a picture of it from a year ago. And so I went almost running across the property to go see it. And I get in, and there is this student there from Sudan. And he's got a hymnal next to him, Lutheran worship, and he is reading the small catechism. And I'm thinking, this is like it was staged or something. It just couldn't be, you know? And so I asked him, I said, what are you doing? And many of the students can speak some English. And he says, Reverend May requires us to memorize the small catechism. I have to have this memorized for class tomorrow. It's like, yeah! That is great. So here's one of the guest cottages. It's complete already, and it's got a nice little kitchenette. You come in and volunteer. And we have probably about a dozen lay people come every year to volunteer, maybe even more than that now. So, Pastor, you're going to stay there too when you come to teach, okay?
You got it.
Pray that African Lutherans would learn pure doctrine. So please pray for us. If you can't do anything else, pray for us. Your prayers will be wonderful. Sign up for email updates. I should have sent this around earlier, but I'm going to send this around, and if you can give us your email address and your physical address, if you want to, only if you want to, you don't need to, but we'd sure like it. And I promise you, you're not going to get a lot of contact from us. You'll probably get 2 hard copy mailings a year. One of them will include a calendar, and we have some calendars here. Please take a calendar. Okay, these are for you. And then you'll get like maybe 4 or 5 emails a year, so it's not a lot. We're not going to bug you. Mostly what we're doing is just keeping you up to date on what's going on. If you can make a financial gift, that'd be great. Some of you have already done that. We've got a bunch of envelopes over there in the basket. Sounds like you guys are pretty well set for mission stuff. But if you can, put us in your annual church budget. Come and volunteer at the new site. You could consider a special project. For instance, you could say over the next 2 years we're going to raise $1,000 to buy tables and chairs for one of the classrooms. And I can send that material to Pastor so you can see the things that are offered there. And then the thing I didn't put on there is raise some money and send us your teacher. Send us your pastor teacher. We need him to come in and teach. So, last scene. This is a perfect summary picture of Africa. These beautiful little blue flowers, and they're surrounded by these 3-inch long thorns. And on our new site, we have plenty of paths which have no thorns, and you're fine to stay on the path. If you get off the path, you just got to watch out, because those thorns will go right through these, rubberized soles that we have. These will go right through them. Yeah. We've had people get hurt, not seriously, but we've been pulling thorns out of shoes for volunteers to come over. And then the last thing, first time we went, we were flying back. I could see on the screen on the back of the seat in front of me in the airplane that we were flying over Iceland, and I looked out the window, and there was this incredible sight of the sun glaring off the tops of the clouds. And my thought immediately went back to Africa and Africans that are going to heaven because the people who are being taught, the pastors and the lay pastors, the pure gospel through Lutherans in Africa. I did fail to mention that the bishops, many of them have come to look at our site and looked over our curriculum, and we were very humble at the start. We just called it a school. We were just building a school. And then the bishops started to come and they said, if you can show us that our evangelists, these are these lay pastors, have gone through your curriculum. We didn't used to have grades or make assignments, but now we do. That's why that young man was memorizing the catechism. And they said, if you can assure us that they've made it through your curriculum, we will ordain them as pastors. So we've started to call our school a seminary. We were good, humble Missouri Synod Lutherans, like, you don't form a seminary. Like, who starts a seminary? God. God starts seminary. We can't do that. And then we realized the seminaries don't ordain, right, Pastor? Seminaries don't send pastors. Seminaries just simply teach. And the local church government, these Lutheran bishops, they were the ones who said, we will ordain these guys. And so it's now the Lutheran School of Theology, and it's a full-fledged seminary. So thank you so much for taking the time to come by. I hope you can support us in some way or another. I'll answer any questions. Anybody have any questions? Did I tell you who I am? Did I do that? Yes.
Do the Muslims give you any profit?
So the Muslims, not directly and physically, but here's the threat the Muslims are. So the Muslims will go down to the local little restaurants or parks or whatever. There's usually one TV in the little villages. And so they'll go down to the restaurant where they've got the one TV for the village, and they'll be showing American TV, and they'll be showing all of this sex and all of this crap. And so the Muslims will say, so are you a Christian? Well, yeah, I kind of associate with this Christian church. Oh, well, that's what Christians are all about. Is that what you want to be all about? Is that what you want your sons and daughters to grow up to be? And so then they'll entice them to come over to the mosque and to learn. So that's the problem in our case. Physically, not really a threat. Now, they are a threat in Somalia, which is just to the north and to the east of Kenya. It borders on Kenya. We had Reverend May had a group of 12 Somalian Lutheran evangelists come to the school to learn 2 years ago. And 12 people came back the next year. And he looked at them and he said, I recognize 6 of you, but who are these other 6 and where are the other 6 going? They died for the gospel. And 6 more came in their place. And this is why I say, in America, sadly, the church is on the decline. In Africa, Christian church is on the rise. And they're zealous. I mean, they'll sacrifice their lives for gospel. So thankfully, Islam does not bother us, at least where we're at. In most of the other countries, Somalia is the worst. So, good question. Yes, Dolores.
We could not hear back here what you said happened to the 6.
Oh, I'm sorry. I lowered my voice for dramatic effect. So he says to the 12 guys that came the second year, 6 of you I recognize. Who are these other 6, and where are the other 6 who were here last year? And they said they died for the sake of the gospel. They died for the gospel. Because in Somalia, if you're a Christian, you're dead.
So they were killed.
Yes. So they were killed for confessing Christ. So we don't let Reverend May go there. He's fearless enough that he would go there and he'd wear his clerical, but but we've talked him down from that. Any other questions? Yes?
What is our fellowship status with them?
Okay, that's a really good question. So, the Evangelical Lutheran Church of Kenya, ELCK, which is where we're located, they are an altar and pulpit fellowship with the Missouri Synod. And so, we have another full-time missionary, Reverend George Ondeki. He's a Kenyan. He does a lot of youth conferences and stuff with some of these same materials. So he is from the ELCK. So then there are, in Tanzania, they're a sister church. They're not an altar and pulpit fellowship with us. It varies from country to country. And so we'll teach anybody. We won't commune anybody, obviously. And really, we don't have communion while the students are there. We're teaching one diocese, small diocese of about 50 congregations. They're independent Lutheran, and I struck up a friendship with this guy, and he messages me almost every other day, and he said, "We want to join a fellowship with you." And I said, "Well, that's not our department. I happen to know the missions guy for the Missouri Synod, Al Culver." And so I said, "Let me give you Al Culver's email. You can email him and just keep me in the loop." Well, turns out they were members of the Liberal World Fellowship, Lutheran World Fellowship, I think.
Lutheran World Federation.
Federation, yeah. So they, Al Culver rightfully told them, "We would love to work with you, but you're going to need to give up that membership." And they were really hesitant. And that was about 6 months ago, and then I just noticed a month ago they've done it, because they have now become a what do they call it? You're looking on, not advisory, but anyway. So they're not full-fledged members of the conservative confessional group. Do you know the name of that one?
I don't.
Yeah, I need to learn this alphabet soon. So, does that answer your question? That's a really, really good question. There's plenty of churches over there that we are an altar and pulpit fellowship with. Yes?
What's the weather?
Okay. So, we're only 100 miles from the equator, but we're a mile high. And so, two things about that. I don't have to take the malaria pills when I go, because there are no malaria-bearing mosquitoes at a mile high. And so that means that the weather is the same every day of the year, except there's a rainy season. And I think it's in our spring. And anyway, the temperature is between 75 and 85 every day. 75 for a low, 85 for a high.
How about humidity?
Not a whole lot of humidity. It's pretty dry. Yeah. Because I sweat like a pig, and when I go there, they don't run any marathons. Oh, by the way, Reverend May is a marathon runner. Our headquarters, because it's a mile high, this is where the Kenyan long distance runners train. So there are places like 3 miles from our place, and he runs with them all the time. Yeah, it's amazing. I don't know how he does it being so fat like he is when you saw in that picture. Good question. Any other questions? Show the picture again. Yeah. No, it's too hard to go all the way back there. All right, thank you so much, and I will be in touch. I will be back to see you again.
We'll go home.
I'm pretty much in charge of my own schedule, and so I'm not stupid, so I'm here in February, March. I decided to go to Phoenix.
All right, so let's thank Reverend Rosso again for being with us. Taking us back to the very beginning, Cotton Blixen,
Yes.
right? She had a pseudonym, actually.
Oh, right.
Isak Dinesen. And if you're interested, she also wrote another book called Babette's Feast.
Right.
And Babette's Feast is it makes up for all of the questionable stuff in out of Africa. Babette's Feast is this wonderful picture of the gospel, this lavish grace. So if you're interested, there's a movie and a book.
You know which one she wrote first, I wonder?
I don't know which one she is, but she's Danish.
Yes.
You know, so, anyways, thank you very much.
My pleasure.
And before we go, though, we have another brother pastor here who's hiding. He's out of uniform today. But this is Matt. Was it Young? I couldn't remember your last name. But one of my former classmates at the seminary in Fort Wayne just showed up. All these people out here for baseball this time of year. So, I mean, Olivia had 4 classmates from Concordia Seward today show up. Totally unplanned. We get Pastor Young.
Oh, we got the cheese heads here, too.
We got, it's a great time. So enjoy the baseball when you can.
No, cheese heads from Wisconsin.
Where's the cheese?
But Pastor Young is from Southern Indiana. What's the church that you serve?
St. Paul's in Jonesville, Indiana.
Right, so Lutherans aren't very creative. St. Paul, one of our favorite names.
I came to hear you preach, so now I got to.
Yeah,
I got to hear him preach yesterday, or Friday night.
guys, I'm not gonna be back this week. I'm gonna do another week in Phoenix. Worth it. If you haven't looked at the table, please look at the stuff that Pastor also has set out. If you haven't had a chance to greet him yet and thank him for being here with us, please do so. And then again, consider supporting Lutherans in Africa. It's a worthy organization. And join with me in prayer, and we'll be on our way. Our Father,
who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
God be with you.